Hello, everybody. We're just going to wait while everybody enters the room. Looking forward to sharing some information with you around Manager Bootcamp. We'll just give it another maybe 30 seconds so we can start on time and end on time for everybody. Okay. I think we're good to go. So Betsy, if you want to advance the slide. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. Wanted to let you know that we will be recording this informational session, so you'll be receiving a link over the next couple of days. It'll be made available fairly soon. And I just wanted to share a little bit about the Wisconsin School of Business Center for Professional and Executive Development. It's a long term, so we call ourselves CPED for short. And we offer programs and certificates that will give you relevant skills needed to advance in your career. All of our programs offer interactive learning sessions facilitated by instructors with practical business experience. CPED also partners with organizations to provide customized professional development programs. We also offer coaching and consulting. So if you need any more information on the Center for Professional Executive Development, again, CPED, you can always visit our website at uwcped.org. Next slide, please, Betsy. So these are just a few explanations around how we're going to work the webinar today. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask during today's webinar, you can submit those questions using either the chat or the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom webinar screen. We will pose the questions that are submitted during the Q&A at the end of today's webinar. It just makes it a little bit easier as Betsy's going through the content if we hold the questions till the end of the webinar. And as I mentioned earlier, the webinar will be recorded and a link will be available within the next few days. So I will now turn it over to Betsy Hagan, who is going to share more information with us about Manager Bootcamp. Thank you, Betsy. You're on mute, Betsy.
Thanks. And thank you for everybody for joining today. So before we get started looking under the hood of boot camp, we want to just do a quick poll question to see what everybody is here for, why you're here, what your interest is really in our bootcamp program. So you'll see a poll pop up, and if you wouldn't mind answering that poll, it would be great. And Brooke or someone will let me know when the poll has been completed.
All righty. Looks like that's about what we're going to get for answers. So go ahead, Betsy.
Thank you. So let me just go through the agenda and objectives, and then we'll get right in. I'll do a little bit of background on me, not much. But I want to get right into the overview of boot camp, especially from the perspective of what previous participants had told us in feedback, what they find most valuable in terms of the benefits that they walked away with from attending our program. We'll talk about the skills and knowledge that we are building as a result of the time you spend in the program, what the experience is like, try to give you a little flavor for that, and then who the program is designed for, and hopefully we have time at the end for some Q&A. Really, the purpose of this webinar is whether you are here because you are interested maybe for yourself in participating in the program, or if you are here because maybe you have somebody in your organization or on your team that you think might benefit from a program like boot camp, we just want to make sure that you have a little bit more detailed information about the program, when it's offered, how it's offered, and what people will benefit from. And that, therefore, at the end, hopefully you feel better prepared to make a decision, either again for yourself or maybe it's for somebody else in your organization. there's a lot on this slide. The only thing I really want you guys to know about me and my background is that I have spent the majority of my career supporting people who make that transition from individual contributor to manager. I have worked in a number of different organizations and with a number of different organizations, focused in on making sure that, for example, they are driving towards high engagement for their employees, that they equate to equaling to organizational results. And so, we feel very strongly that the idea of talent development in organizations who want to accomplish things really starts with making sure that they have really strong foundational frontline managers. And because of this, I've spent a lot of time working, coaching with managers, but also just being able to translate back into the organizations why frontline managers can make such a big difference, not only in the organizational results, but also in shaping the culture of the organization, which I think is really important. So let's just look under the hood of boot camp. And I wanted to do this through the perspective of feedback we've gotten from people who have participated in the program. What I have here are just 5 bullets. We get a lot of feedback on the program. These 5 areas come across the most. So we have most consistently, people will tell us these are the things that they feel like they walked away with from participation in our bootcamp program. And this is both for the 4.5-day in-person program that we offer, and also the 90 minutes once per week for 13-week online program that we offer. So the first thing that participants have told us is that they leave the program with a much greater sense of clarity around the role of a manager. And I think that this happens because, if you think about the forest for the trees, when you're in your organization, you only know what it means to be a manager and what the expectations are for you from your organization. But when you come to our open enrollment bootcamp programs, the fact is you're going to be working with people in different sectors. We have certainly people from different areas of business in manufacturing, professional services, engineering, construction, pharma, all kinds of different industries send people to our bootcamp programs, but also, right, you have people that come from different sectors. So we have people who work in the public sector. We have people who work in nonprofit NGO environments. And, you get that flavor of being able to understand what your organization might expect from you versus what maybe other organizations expect. And I think that just creates clarity. The other thing we have is that we have people who travel all across the country who come to our bootcamp programs, but also we have people travel internationally. So we've had people from Latin America and Central America, the Caribbean, and most recently this February in an in-person session that we had in Madison, Wisconsin, we had a participant who I think has traveled the furthest. He came from Pune, India, right outside of Mumbai, and he experienced for the first time not just his first trip to the United States, but also he experienced winter for the first time in the Midwest in Madison. So he found that to be a great takeaway as well, that he got to experience Midwest winter. Anyways, the second thing that people will tell us is that the confidence that they gain as a result of coming to the program, especially in the areas of having conversations with people around feedback and coaching and performance. And I think that that is important to highlight in the fact of how we approach the learning of the program is not about how many additional things we can add to your plate, but rather how we can take what you're already doing. You're already having one-on-one conversations with people. You're already working with people on problems and situations and client needs, and you're solving problems, engaging with employees. And we're just looking to help you figure out how to take those conversations you're already having and just basically up your game. Stronger awareness and influence across personalities and situations. I think this is a strong piece of feedback that people say they walk away with. And if you think about it, especially if you're newer to a people leader role and you maybe haven't had that expectation of having a great amount of self-awareness of how you show up to your team, right? And how you interact with your team and how you basically adjust and adapt to working with different people and different personalities. If that hasn't necessarily been an expectation in your individual contributor role, that's something that I think that participants in the program really find quite insightful. And we do that by using, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but we use that by using assessments and working on understanding your own preferences, your own personality, your preferences, cognitive and behavioral preferences, how you recognize them in yourself, and then how you can recognize them in others. And just understanding that kind of the mantra in boot camp is that one size doesn't fit all when you're talking about being an effective people leader. And so learning to adapt and understanding how to do that, I think, is a big aha moment for a lot of people as they attend the program. Practical tools to manage accountability, conflict, and change. Practical and pragmatic is what we focus on because, again, we know that people leadership is not a separate job. It's a job, it's a set of responsibilities that sits on top of the deliverables that you have. So you have to continue to deliver as an individual contributor. And on top of that, you need to support the performance of others. And so because of that, when we talk about frameworks and tools and the things that could help you, we're looking at not only how to help you be more effective as a people leader, but also to be more efficient as a people leader. So practical and pragmatic is sort of on the top. And also we focus on making sure that whatever we're delivering is easy to apply when you get back to work after you've spent the time with us right away. The ability to lead both people and results. So one of the things that I think is a differentiator in our program from maybe some of the other management programs that maybe you've looked into, you've come across, is that we focus not only on managing individual performance, which is clearly very important, but also managing the entirety of the work system. The idea that as a people leader, organizations are going to hold you accountable for not just supporting individual people performance, but also how people follow process using tools to create productive outcomes. And so we include that as part of the boot camp curriculum because we know that managers will be held accountable, like I said, not just to making sure that people can do the work, but that processes are designed effectively and that tools enhance productivity and performance. So who should attend boot camp? We've talked about the fact that, it's as you make that transition from individual contributor to manager, that is, I think, a perfect time. What we know about, those big transitional moments in people's careers is that they introduce a little bit of risk because the things that maybe had made you successful in the prior level of responsibilities that you have, as you increase your responsibilities, or those responsibilities change, in that moment, you're developing, you're learning, you need to learn, you need to add to, your already developed set of competencies that you have in a way that helps you to be more successful or be successful in a different leadership context. So we think about the transition, the first big transition people make in their careers from individual contributor to frontline leader. And this program is designed for that. The second sort of way people show up is that experienced leader. We have people who have had, 10, 15 years experience who come to our boot camp program because frankly, they didn't get a lot of support when they first started and they've just learned as they've gone, but they really would like to hear about what kind of different approaches and different structured ways that they can support their teams or their crews or their groups, whatever it is, their departments that they're leading. And the other reason why I think sometimes experienced managers come to our bootcamp program is because maybe something has changed. We very often have people who attend because their organization's gone through restructuring and there are challenges that they didn't have to deal with before, and now those challenges they're faced with those challenges, and they want some support on and ways to build skills that are going to help them deal with them. We also have people who attend boot camp who maybe do not have people management responsibilities. They don't have direct reporting responsibilities, but they lead big projects. Maybe big projects with a lot of moving parts, which means there's probably a lot of moving people around at the same time. And so project leaders will very often attend boot camp and tell us that they've found quite a bit of benefit out of thinking about how they have to deal with, for example, setting expectations and setting goals with team members in a project, but also then having to give people on the project feedback, having to deal with sometimes conflict between various project leaders or stakeholders. And they find that some of the core management components, skills and competencies are actually quite valuable if you're leading big projects in an organization. And then the last people that show up in boot camp are people who maybe are not either they're thinking about a leadership role for the future. Maybe they're tagged to become a supervisor or team lead or manager in like the next 12 months. But also sometimes we have people who their organizations have sent them because they're high performing, high potential individuals, and the organization wants them to get sort of a preview of what being a manager would be all about. And so we have people sometimes who come to the program who don't yet have people management responsibilities, but are thinking about it in terms of their future aspirations and career development. And so I think that pretty much summarizes the people who show up at our organization at our for our program. Sorry. I want to just spend a minute on why this matters organizationally. So one of the boot camp instructors had come up with this, Mark Brewer had come up with this through line visual, and I think it's great. And I want to share it with you guys because to me, it's a great, easy way to understand why organizations should be investing in their frontline managers and why it really pays off when you think about organizational results. So there's tons of research that makes the correlation between the idea that high performing organizations tend to have a highly engaged workforce. And when you think about the term engagement, you're really talking about people who have high energy, a lot of commitment, a lot of connection to the organization, to the work, and therefore they have a lot of satisfaction. That link is pretty clear. What isn't always talked about is how much frontline managers can influence people's ability to become engaged in the work. And for a moment, I just want you guys to reflect on, I want you to think about your best manager and maybe a manager that didn't do it so much for you. Let's call them middling. If you've had a bad experience, we'll just go ahead and you can think of them as the bad manager, right? I want you to think about how the good manager affected your energy, right? So when I think about the greatest managers that I've ever worked with, when I've run into issues or challenges, even remotely starting to feel a little bit burnt out, right? A great manager will swoop in, provide support, uplift you, right? And help you to work through whatever those challenges are. So you kind of move out of whatever might be dragging your energy down back into that high energy state. But if you think about the middling managers or the bad managers, right? My experience has been that they tend to drag you down. They drag your energy. You feel like you have to put a lot more energy in to get the same result. And, I think when that is the case, we're more often or more likely to maybe say, is this really worth it? Right? Do I really need to spend my time and energy at this place doing this kind of work? And because the cost of turnover, unwanted turnover, is so expensive for organizations, there's a definite value to investing in frontline managers so that instead of middling managers, you have great managers who are more likely to create an environment where people become highly engaged. and therefore producing greater results for the organization. When you think about it from how people become managers, very often it is the hard work and the dedication that people have put in to learning, to becoming experts at what they do and being self-sufficient and autonomous. Unfortunately, those are not necessarily the skills that guarantee great people management, because the transition requires you to add into all of that you've already built the ability to influence performance. You need to coach and develop others versus doing and controlling, right? And you've got to align people to the results that matter, and you need to lead people through complexity. And those things are not necessarily things you're going to build as an individual contributor. You might build some of them, and certainly you have built an understanding, hopefully, if you've had great managers, of what it feels like to be managed by somebody who has all those skill sets. So let's talk about the skills that we actually focus on and work on in boot camp. I'm not going to go through all of this, is a lot on this slide. I'm not going to go through all these bullets, but I want to go through the 4 main categories of competency building that we do during the program and give you a little bit of a feel for how we approach it. So the first tranche is performance and accountability. So again, we've been used to, as individual contributors, being accountable for our own results. Now we have to be accountable and responsible for the results of others. And so things like setting goals, delegating work effectively, having good performance evaluations, those kinds of things are tactics that we use. And we certainly talk about those tactics, how you set goals effectively, how you deal with stretch goals, for example, how you ask people to do a little bit more than maybe they had done before. But we also get into sort of the gray areas. So I'm going to give you an example of what we might talk about. We might talk about the fact that maybe you have a solid performer on your team who does the work, who accomplishes the results, who measures up according to, what you set goals for, and yet they have trouble with bringing energy and the right attitude to working in a team environment, right? That's the kind of nuance that we're going to talk about when we talk about building skills in that area. It's not just how do you do goals. It's how do you do goals, and then how do you deal with the behavioral needs that you might have alongside of what you want to get out of people in terms of accountability. Coaching and feedback. Coaching and feedback is kind of the lifeblood, the weapons in our arsenal for being a great manager. And we really need to make sure that we focus in on having high levels of competency to be able to deliver feedback and do coaching on a regular basis. We treat this as so important that we actually have woven this throughout all of the days of boot camp and all of the modules of our online program. We're always, in every topic we're talking about, we're linking it back to, and what does this mean when you're giving feedback, and what does it mean when you're coaching people? So that's an important aspect, and we spend a lot of time giving you a chance to practice some of the techniques that we're talking about. So again, that you leave with more ideas about how you can incorporate some of these things, but also feeling a higher level of confidence that you can go out and have those conversations, especially when maybe they turn a little bit difficult. Influence and emotional intelligence. So I talked a little bit about self-awareness being an important sort of aha moment for some people when they realize that moving into this kind of leadership responsibility means I have to really be aware of heightened awareness of how I show up, why I tend to communicate in the way that I do, and how do I then understand best ways to adapt to the needs of others. Because again, when we think about what is our responsibility as people leaders, it's to support the performance of others. And so our ability to communicate to different people with different styles and different preferences becomes very high on the list of competencies that we need to master. And then the last is conflict and change leadership. So just using practical ways of supporting conflict resolution. And here's the thing, right? So when you move into a people manager role, you might have been used to having to deal with conflict resolution when the conflict was yours, right? You had a conflict with somebody else. But when you're a people leader, very often you have to deal with other people's conflict. And so we talk about that. We talk about how to do that without becoming sort of the mediator of everybody's, challenges that they have with one another. And then you have to deal with resistance when change is going on, and change is always going on. How you deal with that resistance to change in a way that doesn't negatively impact productivity, right? So that people don't get it caught up in sort of loops of resistance that end up, making them less effective and less capable of doing the work that we need them to do. So when you, again, whether or not you're joining us in person or whether you're joining us online, we are always working through the materials and the topics that we cover in highly interactive ways. And so we bring scenarios, we do practice conversations. We are doing a little bit of tool work and framework concepts that we're looking at. And in all those cases, it's again not about there's one way to do it and here's the way, but we're trying to show you a couple of different ways so that you can figure out, based on your needs in the context of your organization, what's going to work best for you. There is a ton of peer discussion. So you can see in this picture, people are sitting at tables in our in-person program, 4 or 5 maybe people at a table. So you're doing a lot of table work, a lot of table discussions, and that's because you're learning from each other just as much as you're learning from the facilitators. And I'm going to talk a little bit about
giving you a 2-minute warning, Betsy. Sorry.
Thank you. The peer discussions, experienced leaders, and sort of immediate application, meaning everything that we give to you guys, you can go back and use right away. So here's the materials that we use. We have some pre-reads and a little bit of assessment work that you do prior to the program, and that's just so that we can hit the ground running when we get there. Here are some of the sessions that are coming up. We have 3 in April, and I just want to highlight the fact that for the first time, we're doing a special 4-day boot camp in Green Bay at the Schreiber Foods headquarters. And so if you're in that area of Wisconsin and you feel like that might be a good fit for you, that is open to anybody who would like to attend. And as I said, we're starting one just in April online if you're interested in that. That's coming up April 1st. Our instructors, I think we always talk about the best of what we are and what we do has to do with our instructors. All of our instructors have 20 plus years in business experience leading teams. And so we approach this as a very practical and pragmatic way of, we're not here to talk about management theory. We're here to talk about the practicalities of being a people manager in an organization and all the challenges that come with that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Natalia and see if we have any questions.
Look at that, 12:29. Thank you, Betsy. Very much appreciated. If you want to learn more about Manager Bootcamp, you can scan the QR code. You can also email us at info@uwcped.org. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, as mentioned, we will have a recording. It will be sent to you. And we really look forward to having you participate in one of the Manager Bootcamp offerings, whether it's in person at Fluno, in person up north in the Green Bay area, or via our online offerings. I don't see any questions coming through. So with that said, thank you, Betsy. Thank you to everybody who attended. And we hope to see you at Manager Bootcamp.